Cooper Kupp is in. What should you expect? Saquon is a game time decision. Is he worth the start if he's active? Amon-Ra St. Brown, he didn't practice all week. What does that mean for him? We're going to get in all to it because, hey, welcome. Bienvenidos to the Injury Prone Podcast. I'm Jorge Martin. Right here to my side, mi compadre, Dr. Edwin Porras, mi amigo. ¿Cómo estamos?
Estamos bien, Jorge. Estamos listo. We are ready to go. It is week 5. The injury burden actually is a little lower, less volume because the bye weeks, that definitely helps. But there are still some really pertinent information that's super important moving forward. So, estamos listo. Stick around. I mean, we're gonna talk some cerveza too. I've gotten some DMs, funny enough, people saying that they started following me for fantasy, but really, they said they started to get impatient if I don't tweet about tequila, which is funny. I'll start tweeting more often about tequila. I sound like an alcoholic, which, hey, I guess it is what it is, right? You are what you are, and I like tequila. We're gonna talk about a lot of other players too, so let's jump into it.
Yes. Also, please make sure you're following us on YouTube. Injury Prone Podcast on YouTube. Por favor, give us that like, give us that subscribe. Hey, we just had our most recent episode, had almost 3,000 people look at it. If all of you give a subscribe, that's gonna be really good for all of us. So por favor, get in there. So, compa, let's just jump into it. Cooper Kupp. We just got the news alert that he's active. So that tells you how alive practically this is. So he's active. You gave a very thorough update a couple days ago on it. But now all of this, so here we are, week 5, first game out, first a hamstring injury, then a setback, 4 weeks on the IR. Expectation level, considering now we've got an extensive injury history.
Sorry about that. I was muted, but this is complicated, right? It's tricky. We have Cooper Kupp, one of the best wide receivers in the league over the last several years, facing this hamstring strain that was obviously serious. And I think it's funny that the Rams came out and said, well, it's not quite as serious as we thought it was. Well, it was serious enough to put him on the IR for a month plus. So it is still a serious injury. It should be taken very seriously. I don't think you should read that headline and really think to yourself, oh, well, this could have been worse. I think the worst case scenario was he had a fracture, an avulsion fracture of the tendon, and he needed surgery. That was really the worst case scenario, but he was only one step below that. He needed all this time to recover. I'm not going to be the one to tell you to sit Cooper Kupp, but you need to understand a few things, and I mentioned this in the video before about hamstring strains. If you want to listen to that, it's the previous video. But here's what you need to know. The older you are, the less likely and the less, the harder it is for you to bounce back from hamstring strains, because the hamstring strains, they create stiffness. And the older that you get, even if you're an elite level athlete, the more stiff your muscles become. It's harder for them to bounce back. If you think of them like a rubber band, they sort of have less elasticity to come back to that position. We know that the more severe that the injury is, the harder that is as well. So not just age, but also the severity. We know this was a pretty big, this was a severe injury for Cooper Kupp. All those things taken into account, he's had world-class treatments. The Rams medical staff, they leave no stone unturned. They do a great job with their rehabs. And I know that they're very data-driven. They try to do the best that they can, the best thing that they can for their athletes. I'm not going to be the one to tell you to sit Cooper Kupp, but I am going to give you some statistics. Wide receivers returning from a hamstring strain, this is since 2018. They see 91% in their first game back. They see 91% of their usual first read targets. That's per fantasypoints.com. But that only results in 70% of their usual fantasy points, 70% of their average for that season. And their median is also around that as well at 67%. So what that tells us is their ceiling is capped and their floor is capped. So you get some sort of decent floor, but you're probably not going to get a ceiling game. Now, obviously, some people will say, well, what is 70% of 26 points per game, right? That's Cooper Kupp, and that's going to be 17 points. I'll take 17 points. That's possible. I'm not saying that's not in the range of outcomes, but I'm simply saying that they're highly unlikely to put him out there at a full allotment of snaps. Now, could they use him in a high leverage situation? Yeah, absolutely. I think that's very possible. But you also still have to consider that they are trying to reduce the risk of re-injury. So the other thing, I think another example to think about is Keenan Allen, last year went out with a hamstring strain. And I mentioned this before. He went out one game, tried to come back, re-injured it. He sat on the IR as well. He sat for a long time, came back his first game, and he's averaging 26 points per game now this year, right? Well, in his first game back last year, he scored 12 points per game. And then in his second game back, he scored 15 points per game. As Cooper Kupp is obviously a level above Keenan Allen, but he's also not Superman, right? So is it possible Cooper Kupp scores somewhere in the neighborhood of like 12 to 15 fantasy points? I do think that's possible, but you still have the re-injury risk and you still have that ceiling that's capped. I think if you want ceiling, Cooper Kupp is probably not the guy that you're going to statistically, historically, from a precedent perspective, want to throw out there, but he is an option. So, people coming for me in the mentions saying 70% of Cooper Kupp is still better than 100% of most guys. That's true. And I'm not going to tell you to sit Cooper Kupp. I'm just saying temper your expectations for this first week back and just cross your fingers that he gets out of there healthy.
Yeah, and you know what? And you're right. They're probably going to make sure to use him a little bit as a decoy on some plays. But the big thing is the Eagles playing against the Eagles this week. It's going to be a tough matchup. It's going to be a really, really tough matchup. Both teams are going to score some points. I think it's about a 50-point over/under. I think there may be a temptation to start really, really using him, but I think it's a good thing that Puka Nacua has emerged, and so has Tutu Atwell. So maybe that takes, at least in the first week, that takes a little bit of the burden off of him. Well, one guy who's got quite the burden on him is Saquon Barkley. So that ankle injury, and I mean, you've talked about ankle injuries being things that linger, with running backs, with all positions, and they're calling him a game time decision. Several games. It's still a while before they have their bye. I mean, they don't have their bye until until December 4th. So, would you play him this week?
I think if I'm in a position where I'm 1-3 or 0-4, I'm just saying screw it. I'm throwing him out there, and I'm hoping that he's active. Right? At least he's not playing on Monday night where you have to make a decision now. But if he's active, yeah, I'm gonna throw him out there. I'm gonna do my best to put my best roster out there because there is some data to show that running backs after a high ankle sprain, it's not the end of the world. The sky's not falling. Now the question is whether he's going to play or not. Some factors in his favor that he's practiced 2 weeks in a row now. We know that the average amount of missed time is about a little over 2 weeks, right? And that's what he will have missed by the time we get to this point. This will be his third game missed. So 2.2 games missed. He's been out since the 17th, right? So in theory, it's possible for him to come back. We also know that the mode, right, the most frequently amount of games missed for running backs after a high ankle sprain is 3. So you mix all that in the pot, he's literally right on the border. Yeah. My gut, which I told you in the beginning, I've mentioned this before, I'm trying to use more of my gut, trying to marry that with the data. My gut tells me that he'll go. Another, small case example that we can use is that Darren Waller in week 1 was also a game time decision. Darren Waller went. Saquon has been practicing for 2 weeks now. He's a freak athlete. He's still a freak athlete. So he can bounce back and still be okay. I think unless the Giants are going to be ultra conservative, which they don't necessarily tend to be, I do think that he's going to give it a go. And I'll give you some data of what you see in running backs of Barkley's profile since 2016 coming off a high ankle sprain. They see 107% of their typical opportunities. That's carries and targets. And they typically score 120% of their typical fantasy points. Saquon Barkley himself coming off a high ankle sprain in 2019, he hit 90% of his average fantasy points from that season in that first week back after a high ankle sprain. The other thing you look at is running backs who missed 2 or 3 weeks. So any running back who missed 2 or 3 weeks due to a high ankle sprain, and we did give a cutoff point. We're not talking about the Matt Breeders of the world. They also score in general 124% of their typical fantasy points. So really, what this means, and what this data is telling us, is not so much like they're going to go off the charts and win your week. That's not necessarily what we're saying, but they are relatively close to. They do meet relatively close to what their opportunities are and what their carries and targets are. You don't see a ton of recurrences, re-injuries with running backs and high ankle sprains, although it is possible. So if Saquon Barkley's out there, I'm probably putting him out there based on what he's been doing prior to this injury. It's a risky move, again, similar to Cooper Kupp. But man, if I'm desperate for a win, especially, I'm putting him out there, and I'm having at least some confidence that even if he sees 80% of his workload, that he can rip off a big run against a Miami rush defense that's actually bottom 6, I believe. If I'm remembering correctly, they're bottom 6 in rush defense. So, man, there's some hope for Saquon Barkley. Keep an eye on it. Jump into Patreon. I'm constantly giving updates there, and stay tuned.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think if he plays, you got to start him, and because they're going to need every weapon possible against that. Yeah, really, just explosive Miami defense, Miami offense. They're fantastic, and they are really not. They really just put everybody. They're playing to stop the pass. They're not playing to stop the run. The Miami is, and we know that the Giants, they're not a good. They haven't been a good defense normally, and now they've got to go up against Tua, Tyreek, Devon Achane, and Jalen Waddle. No me gusta para ellos. No me gusta para ellos. So they're going to need every weapon. So one that's very concerning. Amon-Ra St. Brown. He's missed every practice this week. So I mean, this looks like he's trending toward out, doesn't it?
Yeah, this really feels like he's not going to play. To see what happens in the next 24 hours. Amon-Ra St. Brown himself is that he is going to play, but it doesn't really seem that. If you look at the injury report for the Lions, since Dan Campbell has been there, almost every single time 3 DMPs means that they're not going to play. That's even for the star players. So even though it's possible that they throw him out there, I don't necessarily. I don't want to say. I think you should prepare for the opposite, right? Amon-Ra St. Brown is a dog, and I mean that. I joke about that, but he really is, man. He plays through everything. Through ankle issues, through leg issues, through soft tissue injuries. Like, this dude is out there all the time. He reminds me of like Julio Jones, and Julio Jones reminds me of like Amari Cooper. Amari Cooper's the same way. Amari Cooper's just a dog, just plays through these injuries, and that's not very data driven. That's not very objective. There's not really a lot of like analysis you can take from that. But when I pour through these injury reports every week, Jorge, and I've been doing it for 5 years now, and those are the guys that stand out to me as like they're just gamers. They just go. So I don't want to say like Amon-Ra's got that dog in him, is going to play through this, what could potentially be a core muscle injury, but it's possible, right? I'm concerned in the sense of I really hope this doesn't turn into a full blown he needs core muscle injury surgery the way that Rashad Bateman did a couple of years ago. I'm crossing my fingers. That's the worst case scenario. I'm crossing my fingers. That's not the case. But yeah, he's at a high risk to sit for me right now. And I would make alternative plans right now the best that you can possibly do.
Yeah, that one's and that's a tough one because it's like Josh Reynolds. They did get Jameson Williams back. So I mean, but honestly, to me, if he doesn't go, I'm firing up Sam Laporta in DFS. I'm playing him because that Carolina defense is beatable both against the run and the pass. It's in Detroit. The Lions always put up points, put up crazy points in Detroit. Our amigo said at Fantasy Points, like to call it Coors Field for football, yeah, you're keep an eye on that. But yes, you're definitely firing up Sam Laporta, and maybe even Jahmyr Gibbs could have a little bit of a revival game, a little bit more, some more short area stuff. I check out some of the work that I did on Yahoo this week, especially in the rookie report, because I really did a lot on Jahmyr Gibbs on what he's doing.
You can drop that in the description or the comments or wherever. Drop that in there.
Yes, definitely. Claro que sí. All right, so we got a couple of outs that players that have already been ruled out, not on the level of who we're talking about, but Pat Freiermuth already been ruled out with a hamstring injury. I mean, I traded him to you in your injury-prone league, so
I did. You did. Yeah. You sabotaged me
before he got hurt. Well, you gave me Kyle Pitts, so I don't know who
humble flex.
I don't know who sabotaged who on that one. So, what is the outlook on how long you could be out?
I think the takeaway from that trade was that we both lost. Yes. In a lot of different ways, and that we need help. Okay, we need professional help. But yeah, Pat Freiermuth, not looking good. They're calling it more than just a strain. Probably 2 to 3 weeks for him. I wouldn't expect him back until after the bye. He's on IR watch. Make sure they don't put him on IR this Saturday. But yeah, man, that not looking good.
Oh man. Well, second-year player that there was a lot of hope for coming in, but I mean, just injuries have just derailed him. Treylon Burks. I mean, already, again, another player already ruled out, with him, what's his time frame of getting back on the field?
Yeah, this is really tough because he had some tape on his leg that implicated he could potentially be dealing with a PCL issue. Last year, you saw Dalton Schultz deal with a PCL issue. Lamar Jackson dealt with a severe PCL issue. But these injuries do tend to heal. They just take some time. I think if you give Treylon, he's already out this week again, but I think if you give Treylon Burks another 2 weeks, then that's probably, going to be enough. But really, man, he's really just a deeper league consideration. Even that offense looked better last week, but it still is not. You probably are not starting Treylon Burks because you're hardly starting DeAndre Hopkins.
I know, really, it's just Derrick Henry and DeAndre Hopkins. You're not starting Ryan Tannehill. I mean, maybe in a pinch you're starting Tyjae Spears, but yeah, Treylon Burks. We had more hope for him, but I don't think it's going to happen unless if it does happen, he's probably going to have a really big week on somebody's bench, and then they're going to start him, and then we'll see what happens from there. Well, one player we don't know exactly his status. I mean, a fractured rib. I've had a fractured rib. It took me 6 weeks, and it's no fun. And really, it's just healing. But T. Higgins.
Yeah, T. Higgins came out and said that he's going to play, but we've seen these movies before. We've seen T. Higgins' movies. He tried to play through a hamstring strain, and he didn't play a snap. Not what you want to see. He played through a high ankle sprain. Stat line didn't look very good. So even if T. Higgins does go, which I don't think he will because he was 2 DMPs in a row at this point, I haven't seen a report that he was back out on the field. I don't trust that offense. I don't trust anything that the Bengals are going to put on, on film. I don't think that they're in any position to really feed, it's just kind of it's a weird fantasy football wasteland. You can't start Joe Burrow. You can't start T. Higgins. The tight end is really out. I guess you could consider Tyler Boyd, but Jamar Chase is going to eat. He's really the only guy that you start with any sort of confidence. Even Joe Mixon, you're sort of like, I guess I got to start Joe Mixon. I took him the first 3 rounds of my draft, but yeah, man, that offense is not good, and you're probably going to see T. Higgins out this week, potentially return next week, but this could end up being a 2 to 3 week injury for him. It's just a matter of pain tolerance, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Oof. Oh, I've got bad memories. It's just everything is like a jab into the side, and it's just time. It's just time. So the next players that we're going to talk about is players that are concerns for the long term, not necessarily players that have missed time or maybe haven't, but they're trending toward playing. And one is on one of the best offenses in the NFL, if not the best offense, Deebo Samuel for the 49ers, battling multiple injuries. I mean, it's ribs and knee with him. Why are you really concerned for him on the long term?
So I wanted to get through these quickly and sort of direct people to the Patreon so they can have more of an update and more of a longer form update on these guys. So I'm gonna lump together Deebo Samuel, Mike Evans, and Javonte Williams. Deebo Samuel in particular, yes, is dealing with the knee and the ribs, but he is a guy, that tends to play through things, but he was hardly used last week. I don't expect that necessarily to get better this week, but it can, right? That's something, like I said, head to the patreon.com/injuryprone to get a deeper dive there. Mike Evans, he's in a very precarious situation. Also, very strikingly similar to what Keenan Allen dealt with last year, and very strikingly similar to what Cooper Kupp dealt with this year as a 30-year-old wide receiver and a hamstring strain. He hasn't, there hasn't been any reports coming out that he's not, that he's totally out or anything. They haven't placed him on IR, anything like that. But I am very nervous about Mike Evans and what that might mean. And Javonte Williams so far is averaging 7 PPR points per game before the injury, right? That was something he was dealing with before the injury. Now he's got this groin thing. He had the massive ACL plus issue, before. So what does that mean for Javonte Williams? I don't know. I'm not really buying it. You're really holding the bag on Javonte Williams. Even if you got him in the 7th round, he's not paying off. So again, head to the patreon.com/injuryprone for deeper discussion about these guys. But yeah, it's not looking great.
Yeah, Jaleel McLaughlin was one of the waiver wire dandies for this week. So, I mean, it could be a timeshare in the time. And plus, we're still not in the year time frame that you like for players to be post ACL surgery for them to be really, start to really look at return to performance. And you've talked a lot about how he had a more extensive surgery. I mean, and almost was a milagro that he got on the field. And Mike Evans, I think maybe it's been quiet because they're on a bye this week. So really by next Wednesday is when we should be hearing some more information on Mike Evans. So we'll look at that one. Hey, we've got a question from the Patreon. Our amigo Enrique Suarez, who would you say are the current high upside running back handcuffs to stash on deep teams?
Yeah. So again, these are deep teams, but I'm just going to start from the top. I'm going to give 5 for relatively average leagues, relatively standard size leagues, and then I'll give the sort of deep ones, the deep cuts. For me, obviously, some of these are obvious, some of these are not. So you have Devon St, and these are in order of likelihood for their teammate to be injured, just from a statistical standpoint, from the history, what we know. Devon Achane, Tajay Spears, Keaton Mitchell, who hasn't really shown anything, haven't really heard a lot about him. He probably honestly would be a deeper league consideration, but since he is, since that Ravens backfield is just absolutely devastated by injuries, he's a consideration. Jaylen Warren, obviously, is the huge one. And then another guy that I don't really love because he hasn't shown anything is AJ Dillon, but obviously Aaron Jones went down and that didn't really go the direction that we wanted to. And then a handful of guys that you could also roster, I think, are Tank Bigsby. We know that Travis Etienne has the long history with the foot issue. So Tank Bigsby is one. Zach Charbonnet, his snaps have been going up already anyway. And we know that Ken Walker is dealing with, has dealt with this groin issue that's cropped up and gone away and cropped up and gone away. We already talked about a little bit about Javonte Williams and his struggles. So Jaleel McLaughlin is one. Elijah Mitchell can't stay on the field himself, but I do think that he's also a consideration. I mean, he looks good when he's out there, right? This problem is just being out there. And then the last one I'm going to give here, you can go get the rest of them at patreon.com/injuryprone. The last one, keep an eye on Zach Moss. I know the reports are saying everything's fine. I know the reports are saying Jonathan Taylor is happy now, but you don't just sort of give your boss the middle finger and then come back to work like nothing happened, right? Neither side, I think, is really going to let that fly. The possibility, it's very possible Jonathan Taylor gets dinged up, maybe hurts that ankle again. He says, I need 6 games. I've met threshold. I'm going to chill. I'm going to sit this game because my contract is already accrued and I want to get healthy and I want to be ready for the next team because I know I'm not going to re-sign here, right? Or he could get traded and that leaves Zach. That's another path for Zach Moss as well. There are a lot of paths for Zach Moss to still sort of remain fantasy relevant. I wouldn't cut him or drop him just yet, but those are the top ones that I'd give you. Devon Achane, that's still taking a while for me to say, right? Tajay Spears, Keaton Mitchell, Jaylen Warren, AJ Dillon, Tank Bigsby, Zach Charbonnet, Jaleel McLaughlin, and Elijah Mitchell and Zach Moss. Those are the ones that I would say are some handcuffs to consider. You are muted, amigo. You pulled an Edwin.
Great minds think alike. I wanted to add one thing on Zach Moss because the last game that Jonathan Taylor has played in was December 17th. He has not logged a full practice in pads or anything like that. So, and so we're talking almost 10 months here that he hasn't taken a hit. So that's why I think that, even if he's active this week, I think I think it's going to be a timeshare for at least a week or two before they unleash Jonathan Taylor, because it's different when you haven't gotten hit for that long a period of time. So I wish him the best. He's one of my favorite players. I hope he's healthy, hope he's back. But yeah, temper the expectations. And I know because I have him on a lot of teams, surprisingly teams that are doing well. So and teams where I drafted him early, and then all of a sudden, oh yes, this happened. So, mi amigo, so we've got Cultura class time. So a little time. So we've talked about tequila in the past. We've talked about different foods, but nuestro favorito cerveza mexicana, our favorite Mexican beer. I'm gonna throw it to you first.
I'm really a sucker for. I told you before we started recording, I don't venture out as much with the beer, the cerveza, as I do with the tequilas, but I really like a good old fashioned Corona, right? Just like Corona, throw a lime in there. You were telling me about lemon. I'm gonna have to try it. I really like that. And then Modelo's obviously a staple. I really like Modelo. Those are my two go-tos, and those are really basic. I'm very basic as a person, so that tends to match up pretty well. But I do need to try more. So what are your favorites?
So, well, first off, I'm going to give you a tip that a friend of mine gave me with Corona. To drink about a shot's worth, basically drink the neck out of it, and put a shot of vodka in it, and then put the lemon, and then you turn it over with your thumb on there, and let all the vodka in there. Let me tell you something. You just need one, and you are just feeling good. You are feeling good.
Okay.
So
All right.
that's it.
That is not what I expected you to say.
my official compadre, best man at my wedding. He's Italian, by the way. Giuseppe Narduli Jojo. He showed it to me. He calls it the Stoli Corona. So try that, familia. My go-to is always Pacifico. I could drink that if I'm grilling carne asada. I've got a Pacifico with lemon on it. I learned that from a trip to Cabo San Lucas. So some people call it Cabo San Lucas. So we're both Mexican. We got to call it by the official name, Cabo San Lucas. Bartender gave it to me with lemon. Changed my life. Game changer. Now I only keep lemons in the house. So I put lemon in everything, and it's perfecto. Drink that one all day. El Modelo out here. We also have another one called Estrella Jalisco. So shout out to the el estado de patria de my parents. My parents are both from Jalisco, so shout out to them. So Estrella Jalisco, one of the favorites. One of the favorites. But yeah, start out with Pacifico is my 101 all day long. All day long. Hot day. It's hot out here right now. I'm gonna see some friends later on. Going to a Mexican restaurant. Definitely.
Absolutely.
Pacifico. So, mi amigo. All right. So, well, let's wrap it up. Buenas noches where you are, and we're definitely in the afternoon on my side. Otra vez más. Follow Injury Prone Podcast on YouTube. Compadre, you want any other shout out about what's coming up on the Patreon?
No, yeah. So we didn't talk about Kenny Pickett, Justin Herbert, Austin Eckler, none of those guys, right? We didn't talk about any of those guys, but that's intentional because we don't have that much time. So if you want to get in on the action and talk about those guys, again, patreon.com/injuryprone. We'll get into that. The last thing just came through. T. Higgins did practice today. I said, I'm on record saying you can blame me. I'm not going to start him unless I really need him. Unless it's a deeper league, I'm going to look for other options. Maybe look at some good DFS options and try to throw them into my lineup. It's hard to trust the Bengals pass catchers right now. T. Higgins has hardly been good. Now he's going to play through this ribs injury. That's a pain tolerance issue. I needed to throw that in there at the end. I'm not saying bench him, but I'm also saying I don't blame you for sitting him.
No, estoy contigo. So, well, everybody, nuestra gente, muchas gracias for joining us. Check us out. Get ready for your week 5 action. Get into the Patreon. Get the latest and greatest from El Doctor. And right now, that's it. Salud.